Your fingerprint, your face, your voice, even your DNA. These are, well, these unique bits of you that are increasingly becoming the keys to unlock your digital world.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're doing a deep dive into this whole area where biology meets security. And the really big question, the one driving this whole chat is, when we use these permanent identifiers, our biometrics for security, are we basically just giving up our privacy?
That's the core tension. Is
Yeah.
I mean, on one side, biometrics feel incredibly convenient.
Yeah, you don't leave your face at home, right?
Exactly. So getting into your phone or your bank, it feels seamless.
Hmm?
But our goal today is really to get past the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, doubt, and actually look at the tech itself.
And that seems vital because here's the thing. Unlike a password,
Mm.
if that gets compromised, you just reset it. Done.
Right.
But you can't just reset your face or your fingerprint. If that data gets out there,
Yeah,
well, it feels like a permanent part of you is compromised forever.
precisely. And before we sort of panic about that permanence, let's
Yeah.
get on the same page. What is a biometric?
Good point.
Basically, it's any measurable physical or behavioral characteristic, fingerprint, iris scan, how you walk, your voice that can be used to uniquely identify you, or maybe more importantly, authenticate you.
Okay.
So we need to unpack how these systems actually see you, where that data goes, and what the real risks actually are, because it's often not quite like the spy movies suggest.
Okay, let's jump right into that then. When you talk about protecting our biometrics, I think most people assume we're trying to protect a secret, something private.
Hmm.
But are these physical markers, are they actually secret? Can we even control them?
Well, this is fascinating because the straightforward answer is no, not really.
No.
No, we're basically broadcasting this information about ourselves all the time, whether we intend to or not.
Right, like we object, and rightly so, to the idea of being forced into some kind of fingerprint database for surveillance.
Yeah.
Yet every single time you pick up a glass or open a door handle or even use cash, you're leaving dozens of pretty clear fingerprints behind on totally unprotected surfaces. Anyone could theoretically lift them.
Absolutely. Or think about DNA. We shed skin cells,
Yeah.
hair. It's everywhere.
Ugh,
Your face, well, it's right there on the front of your head every time you walk outside. And your voice. It can be recorded anytime you speak near a phone, or increasingly even a smart speaker or a security camera with audio.
So trying to physically hide these things, it's basically impossible, a losing game.
It really is. Which leads to a crucial shift in perspective.
Which is?
If the physical feature itself isn't really the weak point because we can't hide it, then the real security and privacy discussion. It has to pivot entirely to consent and use.
Ah, okay. So not that the data exists, but who has it and why.
That is the absolute core insight. Since we expose this stuff constantly, the privacy concern isn't the existence of the data. It's did you actually agree to it being collected? And maybe even more importantly, what specific purpose is the system using it for once it has it?
That line between using it as a tool you control for access versus a tool someone else uses for surveillance.
That distinction is everything. Absolutely everything.
Okay, let's dig into the technology itself then, because this feels like where a lot of the myths come from. You
Yeah.
know, this idea that there's some central government database with photos of all our fingers and our complete DNA sequences.
Right, the sci-fi version.
Yeah. So if the system isn't actually storing a picture of my finger, how on earth does it recognize me?
Okay, this is where we need to slow down a bit and just appreciate how clever the engineering actually is.
Yeah.
The key, as you said, is that the system doesn't store the image. It stores a kind of map.
A map.
Yeah. There were basically two main phases. First, there's registration or enrollment. Then there's matching or usage.
Okay, walk us through registration. The first time you say, set up fingerprint, unlock on your phone.
Right. So you place your thumb on the sensor, it captures that image, but almost instantly that raw image gets tossed.
But it doesn't keep it.
Nope. The system's processor immediately starts looking for unique physical markers. In fingerprinting, these are called biometric minutiae.
Minutia. Okay, simple terms. What are those?
They're tiny, very specific characteristics in the ridge patterns on your finger. The system is basically scanning for things like ridge endings, where a ridge line just stops.
Okay.
And also bifurcations, that's where a single ridge splits into two separate ridges. Think of a fork in the road.
Got it. Ridge endings and splits.
Exactly. And for every single one of those unique little features it finds, the system records 3 specific pieces of numerical data.
3 numbers for each point. What are they?
Okay, first, the X and Y coordinates, basically where that feature is located on the map of your fingerprint scan.
Like a grid reference.
Precisely. Second, the angle of the ridge. At that exact point, which direction is that ridge heading?
Okay, location and direction.
This collection of numbers, all these coordinates and angles, that is what gets stored. And that numerical data set is called the biometric template.
Right, so just numbers, no picture. Why is that safer then? If someone steals the database, they still have my numbers, right?
They do, but here's the clever bit. This process of creating the template from the image, it's designed to be a one-way trip.
One way.
Yeah, cryptographers call it a hash function, essentially.
Huh.
Think of it like creating a very, very detailed summary of a book. Once you have that numerical summary, the template, it's mathematically, and for all practical purposes, impossible to reverse engineer that summary back into the original full picture of your fingerprint.
I see. So even if a database is breached, the attackers get a bunch of numbers, but they can't reconstruct my actual fingerprint image from them.
That's the idea. They get numbers, not a reusable image they can plant somewhere else easily.
Okay, that makes the security aspect much clearer. So once that irreversible template is stored, how does the system actually match me when I try to unlock my phone, like 10 minutes later? That's the usage flow you called it.
Exactly. So you place your finger on the sensor again.
Mm-hmm.
The system does the exact same extraction process all over again, right there, on the spot.
Okay.
It generates a brand new numerical template from that fresh scan. Then it simply compares the numbers in this new template against the numbers in the template it stored earlier.
But hang on. Like we said, life happens. What if my finger's slightly birdy, or the skin's dry that day, or I press harder? If the template is this fixed, irreversible hash, how can it ever accept a match that isn't 100% identical?
And that brings us to maybe the most crucial practical element, error tolerance.
Error tolerance.
Yeah. If the system demanded a perfect 100% match every single time, well, it would fail constantly. You'd never get in.
Right, that would be useless.
Totally. So every biometric system has to allow for an acceptable error margin. It looks for a close enough match, not a perfect one.
So there's a trade-off.
Always. It's a balance. A very low acceptable error margin means higher security, fewer false accepts, but probably more frustration for you, more false rejects. Think like a high-security military base scanner
Right. Annoying but secure.
versus a higher acceptable error margin, which means more convenience like unlocking your phone quickly, but it does slightly increase the theoretical chance of a false positive, someone else getting in. The system designer chooses that balance based on the application.
Okay, mechanics covered. Let's pivot back to the purpose of using the biometric. You mentioned identification and authentication earlier. Why is that distinction so critical for understanding the privacy risks?
Oh, it's absolutely vital. This distinction is really at the heart of the whole Big Brother debate. So identification is about the system trying to figure out who you are, often without you actively initiating it, like whose face is this?
Okay.
Authentication, on the other hand, is about you proving you are who you claim to be.
Yeah.
Usually because you started the interaction, like, yes, it's really me trying to log in.
Okay, give us an example where identification starts to feel problematic from a privacy standpoint.
Well, identification can be perfectly fine, even useful, like maybe you walk up to a secure door, it recognizes your face as someone authorized,
Yeah.
then asks for your PN. That's identification as part of authentication.
Right.
The misuse, the part that raises red flags, is when identification is used for things like mass surveillance, profiling, or tracking in public spaces.
Right.
Using cameras to figure out who everyone is just because they walk down a street.
Yeah, that's the scenario most people object to, I think. Finding out who I am without my explicit permission or interaction.
Exactly. That passive, potentially non-consensual identification is the core worry.
Which, okay, leads straight back to that point in the source material about cell phones. We're already carrying these incredibly sophisticated tracking devices, right, that we pay for. Doesn't that kind of weaken the argument against other forms of surveillance?
It's a really fair point for context, absolutely. But I don't think it neutralizes the argument entirely. Well, with your phone, you generally have a contract.
Okay.
You consent to being located by a specific company, your carrier, for a specific primary purpose, which is making calls and using data.
Okay.
The concern with widespread biometric surveillance is often that it's non-consensual in the first place. It could potentially be retrospective analyzing footage from the past, and it might be used by state actors or unknown third parties for purposes way beyond just routing a phone call. It really comes down to who controls the tracking, why they're doing it, and whether you ever agreed to it.
So the context matters, and authentication remains the sort of least controversial, most clearly valid use case.
Absolutely. Authentication, especially when it's part of multi-factor authentication, MFA, is generally seen as a good thing. It's you, the user, willingly proving your identity to get into a system you chose to access and consented to use. It's about securing your stuff for you.
Okay, let's tackle the scary stuff now, the threats. If I'm relying on, say, my face to protect my bank account, how good is that system against fakes? Let's start with the false positive dinero. The system thinks it's me, but it's actually an imposter.
Right, the imposter scenario. The biggest threat on that front today really comes from deepfakes.
Ah, the AI-generated fakes.
Exactly. AI-generated synthetic images, videos, voices, older, simpler systems.
Hmm.
Yeah, you could sometimes trick them by just holding up a high-resolution photo or maybe playing a voice recording.
Not anymore.
While modern systems, especially the ones on high-end phones and secure access points, have become much, much more sophisticated. They use what's called liveness detection.
Liveness detection. Okay, how does my phone know I'm not just showing it a really good photo of myself?
It uses multiple tricks. Face scanners, for example, often project thousands of tiny, invisible infrared dots onto your face.
Infrared dots.
Yeah.
Why?
To build a true three-dimensional depth map. A flat photo doesn't have that depth. They might also look for subtle cues like heat signatures or tiny micro-movements of your pupils or even blood flow under the skin, things that indicate it's a real, living person presenting the biometric, not just a static image or a video playing on another screen.
That's actually quite reassuring. Okay, but what about the classic spy movie trope? The gummy finger. Lifting my fingerprint from a glass and making a mold.
Yes, the old Mission Impossible trick. Again, modern fingerprint readers are way better than the old ones.
How so?
They look for more than just the ridge pattern. Many use capacitive sensing. They're measuring the electrical properties that, well, only living human skin and tissue actually have. A silicone mold or, a gummy finger just won't have the right capacitive signature. It fails the liveness test in a different way.
Okay. Are there any biometrics that are still, like, really vulnerable to these fakes, especially deep fakes?
Voice biometrics are definitely the weakest link right now, unfortunately.
Right, why?
While voice can be useful for identification, maybe figuring out which customer is calling into a call center, it's generally considered not reliable enough for strong authentication, like logging into something sensitive.
Because the fakes are too good.
Exactly. AI voice synthesis, the deepfake voices, are getting incredibly advanced and honestly pretty easy to create. Most systems really struggle to reliably tell a good synthetic voice from a real one. So yeah, you should definitely not rely on voice alone to protect anything important.
Good to know. Okay, then there's the other kind of failure. The false negative.
Right. That's the opposite problem. It is really you, but the system says, nope, access denied.
Why does that happen?
Usually because something about your biometric has temporarily changed significantly. Maybe you've got a really bad cut on your fingerprint ridge, or your face is swollen up because of an allergic reaction, or, you have a terrible cold and your voice sounds completely different.
So it's annoying, but it's not a security breach against me.
Exactly. It's inconvenient, frustrating even, but it's technically a security failure that errs on the side of caution, protecting your account rather than letting the wrong version of you in. It's not letting an imposter in.
Okay, let's shift to something maybe more subtle, but potentially more dangerous in the long run. Function creep. You mentioned this earlier.
Yes, function creep. This is arguably one of the biggest long-term privacy risks because it's so insidious. It happens gradually.
Define it for us again.
It's when a system, which was set up with perfectly good intentions, maybe clear consent, for one specific purpose, slowly starts being used for other things. Things you never agreed to, things that weren't part of the original deal.
Can you give a concrete example of how that might play out?
Sure. Imagine a big company installs face scanners at all the building entrances. The stated purpose, the one employees consent to, is just for efficient time and attendance tracking, making sure people clock in and out easily.
Okay, seems reasonable enough.
Right, everyone agrees. But then, maybe a year later, the HR department realizes, hey, we have logs of everyone's entry and exit times. We could repurpose this data.
Repurpose how?
Maybe they start integrating it with performance reviews, tracking not just when you arrive, but correlating your entry times with how often you seem to take breaks by scanning you going in and out of certain areas. Or maybe even linking entry times to reported illness rates across different departments to look for patterns.
Oh, okay. So the system is suddenly tracking performance, maybe even inferring health information.
Exactly. Functions you absolutely never consented to when you agreed to use the face scanner for clocking in. The original purpose has crept into something much more invasive. Control is lost.
That really highlights why the privacy discussion can't just stop once the system is installed. Okay, but let's circle back to my initial fear. If my numerical template, that irreversible hash, that set of numbers representing me, gets stolen in a big data breach, am I just permanently compromised? Is that it?
That is the fundamental vulnerability we have to address with permanent biometrics. If the template is compromised, you can't just issue a new fingerprint. But researchers are working very hard on mitigation strategies. The most promising area right now is called cancelable biometrics.
Cancelable biometrics. Okay, that sounds almost contradictory. How do you cancel a permanent physical thing like a fingerprint?
You don't cancel the trait, you cancel the template. Remember, the template is just that set of numbers, the map.
Right.
Cancelable biometrics use a clever cryptographic technique. Essentially, before storing that numerical template, you mix it with something called a cryptographic salt.
A salt, like for seasoning.
Kind of. Think of the raw template numbers as the basic ingredients for a recipe. The cryptographic salt is like a unique, random, secret spice blend that's different for every single company or service provider using the biometric system.
So my bank uses one salt, my phone uses a different one, my work uses another.
Precisely. When your phone, say, generates the template numbers from your fingerprint, it cryptographically mixes those numbers with that specific service's unique salt before it stores the final salted template.
Okay, I think I see where this is going. So if my template gets stolen from, say, Bank A,
It's basically useless at Bank B or on your phone or anywhere else, because an attacker who steals the template from Bank A also needs Bank A's unique secret salt to make any sense of it or try to use it.
right, without the specific salt, the stolen numbers are just gibberish to any other system.
Exactly. The compromised template is only potentially valid if the attacker also knows the unique salt associated with that one specific system. If Bank A gets hacked, the stolen data is effectively scrambled and useless for attacking Bank B or your personal phone, because the unique seasoning required for a match is missing or different. It makes the compromised data useful only in a very narrow, non-generalizable way. It contains the breach.
That feels like a really important development for the future. But what about right now? What's the single best protection we have today against a breach of any kind, biometric or otherwise?
Oh, without a doubt, multi-factor authentication, MFA,
MFA, we hear about it all the time.
and for good reason. The golden rule should be never rely on a biometric as the only factor for accessing anything sensitive. Always pair it with something else,
Like what?
like something you know, a strong password, or a PIN, or something you have, like your specific phone, or a physical security key.
So the biometric is one lock, but you need a second different key too.
Exactly. MFA ensures that even if somehow an attacker managed to perfectly replicate your biometric and bypass liveness detection, and they had the right salted template, they still wouldn't have that second factor. The password, the PIN, the physical key needed to actually get in.
Yeah.
It drastically reduces the risk.
And tying this all back to our earlier point about consent and use, where the template is actually stored matters hugely too, right?
Oh, crucially important. Yes. If your biometric template is stored locally, right there on your device, like many high-end smartphones do now in a secure chip, the risk surface is much, much smaller.
Because an attacker needs my actual phone.
Right. They'd need to physically compromise your specific device to even try and get at the template. But if your template is stored up in some big centralized cloud database run by the service provider, well, that database becomes a massive, very tempting target for hackers worldwide.
So we should always be asking, where is this data actually living?
Absolutely. Ask where it's stored and make sure your initial consent explicitly covers that storage method and location. Local storage is almost always preferable from a privacy perspective. So let's bring it all back to the big question we started with. Does relying on biometrics for security inherently violate your privacy? And I think the answer has to be, well, kind of D. All of the above. It's nuanced.
That's so.
Well, used correctly, with consent, strong security like MFA, and maybe cancelable templates in the future, biometrics can offer incredible security, arguably protecting your private information better than just a password ever could. But if they're used improperly, if they're collected without real informed consent, if the purpose creeps beyond what was agreed upon, or if they're used for mass identification and surveillance, then yes, absolutely, they become the very tools of that Big Brother scenario we all worry about. Constant vigilance is required.
So for you listening, what does this really mean? Since trying to totally hide your physical biometric information feels like, as we said, a losing game, The real focus has to shift. It has to be about governance.
Hmm.
It's about how the information is used and how we prevent its abuse. And given that new applications for this tech are popping up constantly in workplaces, healthcare, retail,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder, what systems are you currently consenting to, maybe without fully realizing the potential scope down the line?
And that raises a really important follow-up question, doesn't it? Thinking about things like cancelable biometrics and the power of MFA. What safeguards should we, as users, start demanding from companies and services before we agree to enroll in any new uses of this powerful technology?
That's a great point to ponder. We always love hearing your thoughts after these deep dives, so please do share your insights or any questions you still have on this topic wherever you're listening.
Yeah, definitely jump into the conversation.
And if you found this breakdown of biometrics, security, and privacy valuable, maybe give this deep dive a like. It really helps others find it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, make sure you're subscribed and maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss our future explorations.
Please do.
And finally, if you know someone who's maybe a bit confused or concerned about face unlock or fingerprint scanners, share this deep dive with them. Help spread a bit more understanding about this really critical balance between security and surveillance.
Thanks for tuning in.
We really appreciate you joining us on this journey today.